Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for another rendition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. We appreciate you joining us here and spending your afternoon with us. We are joined today, very luckily, to talk about mastering the art of photo editing with what we've decided to rename Dolphia. That's it. No more last names. We're jumping into 2021. We're going the likes of Cher and Prince. So she is now just Dolphia. Dolphia, thanks so much for joining us. As always, anybody who's joining us here on any of our channels watching, please make sure to go ahead and drop any questions you have below, and we'll wait towards the end to get them answered. Dolphia, thanks for being here. I'll let you have the floor.
Well, thank you so much for hosting me. So today's topic is actually very close to my heart, and in a moment, I'm going to just share my screen. So we're talking about mastering the art of photo editing, and I'm going to share my screen. Okay, and here we are. So I personally think that, that through my photographs, I like to tell a story, and I am not very good with my words because I'm a computer science engineer, and later I became a UX designer. But I always feel that words are not enough for me to explain the beauty I see in the world, and photography is my way to the story I want to tell to my viewers. So I personally love this quote that photography is the story I failed to put in the words. So there are a few editing softwares out there, and I'm just mentioning a few, but there are a lot out there, and you probably love something that you're comfortable with. That's totally okay. I use Adobe Lightroom, and Photoshop because I have a Creative Cloud, like the full version subscription, thanks to my work. But if not, I also always had the photographers version, which is $10 a month. It's because I am comfortable using Adobe, and I've been using it for a long time. I spent a lot of time learning it, so I'm comfortable using it. But there is another one called Capture One, and I'm hearing a lot of photographers these days are liking it. And for the phone photos, I use Vosco and Snapseed, but Apple's default editing is also fine. So these, between Adobe and Vosco and Snapseed, these are my favorite softwares to edit a photo. So like I said, I used Adobe Photoshop and Lightroom only when I'm editing a photo that I have captured with my camera. So why I capture editing with my makeup regime, because editing is like an art, and so let's all master the art through this session. Let's see how much we can do that. So editing in photography is what is a brush to painter, right? So you want to paint a photo and you need the brush, and editing is a lot like that. So because some people are like, oh, is this photo edited? Because it's kind of like, sometimes it's viewed with the negative connotations, but I just want to make sure that in photography, it's never a bad, because, it's like you would not send an artist to paint without a brush, right? The similar way. However, I feel like, I always compare editing with a makeup. For women, we always have a lot of makeup products, but there's a lot available right now. But, it's like if you apply too much, you can look like a clown, or, if you want to go ahead with that look, that's okay. But, sometimes too much can break your look, and sometimes too little can make you look plain. So same with the editing. Too much can break your photo, and too little can make your image like look a little plain. But remember, sometimes less is more. And I always remember one tip I learned from Coco Chanel, that before you leave the house, look at your mirror and take one thing out. That also applies a lot towards editing. But you really need to learn like where to start and where to stop. And that takes a little time to master it. So it's not going to happen overnight. So you will spend some time mastering it. So it's okay if you're not there, but trust me, you are going to get there one day. But beginning of editing, you cannot change a photo from like really bad to like amazing if your composition is bad, if your lighting is bad, if you're burnt all the highlights, and let's say if it's too dark that you cannot recover the details. It's I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's really hard. So good photo is a base for having a perfect shot. Like, so good photo is like a good skin, right? So you need to make sure your skin's really, well maintained, so that, when you apply makeup, it's like, you still look amazing, right? So your photography is like nearly perfect. That's my mantra when I go. So when I take photos, I make sure that my photo is like nearly perfect, so that I don't have to use a lot of editing, because it can make it look a little fake. But it cannot fix, like, angle issues, lighting issues, and many other things. And I'm sure you can see B&H, they have a lot of probably courses on how to take a good photo. And I have a couple of ones, but I have seen there are many more courses in B&H that how to take a good photo. And I'm sure you can learn that. I always photograph raw, and I always recommend everybody photograph raw. Even for mobile photos, these days, Apple is allowing to photograph Pro RAW, but there is a lot of apps in Apple that you could download and you could still photograph in RAW mode. RAW gives you a lot more data in your photo, so that you can use it in your advantage when you're editing. Once I photographed my Diwali project, and I really in JPEG, and I really cried for like 3 days, because I was like, oh my God, I ruined my whole entire shoot. But I have done a minor edits, because the photos were like nearly perfect. It didn't require much editing. Colors were okay and everything. So I only did a little bit minor edits in my photos, and it was okay. The photos were it's great for Instagram. But like I said, if you're shooting raw, you have a lot more data point for you to edit. I'm sure you can learn a lot more about it from internet, than why shooting versus raw versus JPEG. So let's dive deep, right? So the first question, before we start about editing, how do you save your photo? So if I'm using a Lightroom, I have an export setting I found that works the best for me. So before we talk about nitty-gritty details of photo editing, let's talk about the file naming. So first I name, what am I photographing, right? Soup, sandwich, curry, anything, like what am I editing? Then I add the season, like it's a fall, if it's a summer, it's a spring, it's a winter. And then I add the specialty, like what sort of photo is it? Is it a chicken, it's a curry, it's an egg salad, or is it a maricosad? That's my personal project. And the last comes with my initials. And always I use camel case, because like I said, I'm a computer engineer, and I always name my file camel case, because that's what I'm used to, even for my coding as well. So for example, a photo, like let's say I'm photographing a carrot soup in a fall, I would name this fall soup _carrot _dn. And the reason I added the dn, because when I'm sending it to the client, I just want them to know that this is coming from me, some, not anybody else. So that's why I add the initials. And where to save, and this is my very favorite topic, where, because I get these questions a lot in social media, like, how do you save your files? So I have two ways of storing photos. The first, I use an SSD drive, and with enclosure. I strongly recommend SSD drive, because it's very stable over regular drive. So it doesn't break easily. Trust me, I have used other drives and they break apart. So I lost like sometimes days worth of editing work over that. So my husband made me switch to SSD, and in like 2018 or 19, and I have not repented a single day. But SSDs are expensive. They can go up to $300, starting even more. But we found actually a workaround for this. And so he said that should buy the drive itself, and it's like cost $100 actually in Amazon. And then you can actually buy the enclosure. So the whole thing becomes your external drive. So I have a 1 terabyte that I use it for day-to-day editing. However, this is my primary storage. All these photographers are permanently stored in a network attached storage. And these are, this is a lot more stable. So I use that a lot. So, so far we have purchased close to 12 terabytes, and I'm not joking, of storage to keep our photos all from 2014. So this is the two-way approach, but it really works. I have not lost a single work I have done so far. So now let's get started, right? So before we start about editing, even like, let's find a comfortable space for you to sit down and edit. I personally found that it can vary from person to person. I personally find a couch or my office chair, which is a very ergonomic chair. It's very comfortable to sit. And it's a very, so I get myself in a comfortable position, and with a blanket on and with my tea right next to it. So I'm in a relaxed mood to edit. Next is finding editing lights. So in a room like this where the lights are falling on my eyes, I'm not being able to edit it really well, or if it falls on my screen. So for example, in my office, we have two large windows that's right next to me, like here. And we have also a lot of fluorescent ceiling lights that fall right on my screen. So I couldn't edit. And, I just do not edit just for social media or my work, or my photography business, but I also edit a lot of photos for my work because I'm a designer. So after this, mentioning this, that I cannot use, I cannot sit at my desk to edit any photos. My manager actually purchased me a pivot desk. So basically it swivels, so I could actually move my monitor so that so the light's not falling on it when I'm editing. So, if you need to find a spot where, you're comfortable editing. Some people probably prefer that if they're sitting in a light room like this. I prefer to edit in a dark where I can see the lights and the colors really well. So it's, again, it's your personal preference. Calibration is super important. I found that my Mac and the monitor, what I'm using at work or at home is not calibrated properly. But I always edit on my Mac because of the flexibility. So I can edit at home, I can edit at work, or I can edit, in one of the conference rooms if I'm hiding, or, if I'm traveling anywhere. I always edit on Mac. It's my universal truth, no matter where I am. Even if I'm at home, I have a, I have an actually very high quality monitor, Ultra HD, I believe, but I still will edit on Mac because of the flexibility and it stays consistent. But if you are using a monitor, B&H sells an amazing calibration device. I have not used it, but I called them several times to buy that. So you can call them and ask what calibration you should buy for the monitor. So make sure you remember that. But once I export the photos, I sit on the photos for a few good days before I post it on social media or I share with my clients. So then I export these photos on my phone and I make sure I check the photos in the morning, in the evening, and in the night, and for a couple of days just to see if I'm really liking the editing. Like, several of my portrait photos of the Marie Cassatt I have edited. It's like, let's say I posted it on Friday, I would edit it on Tuesday, and I sit on it for a couple of days, and I'm like, okay, maybe I feel that yellow is too much. Maybe let's go down and tone it down. And that's also I do with the food, or maybe this photo is a little too blue, or this is an error. The point is, when you're editing for a long time, you don't see these things. But if you sit on it, if you look at it later, you will find this problem. But that being said, my portrait shots takes way longer time, like 8 to 12 hours, rather than my food photos, which takes a significantly less time. Like I said, make sure you get a clean break. Like, I never edit more than an hour at a time. I would first, let's say, import my photos. I will go over them. I'll pick a few. I'll do a very basic edit. And like I said, in 1 hour, within 1 hour, whatever I can, I have a timer. I say, Siri, set a timer for an hour. Hour is done, I'm done. I will close it. I'm not going to edit more than an hour, because you don't see what you're doing wrong. You keep doing it because you still kind of, your eyes gets fatigued. And I learned this from actually one of my contractor who was, I was picking the house colors, and he said, don't look there more than 20 minutes, because if you keep looking at it, you're going to pick a color that you end up hating it. So look for 20 minutes, walk away, come again, maybe next hour, or maybe 2 hours later, look again, and then you will find the color that you love for a long period of time. So that also applies to photo, when editing. Get a clean break, take a couple of hours off, cook or do something else, go for a walk, go for anything, come back and edit again, so that make sure, you're starting again refreshed. So when I'm editing a batch of photos, for example, for a carousel or for a blog post, I want to make sure all photos have similar look and feel. So, what I do is that, it makes the editing process a lot more faster. So I use, Lightroom has an option called create a preset. So basically all these settings, I save it and then I apply to the next, let's say 7 or 8 photos. So, it really helps you to edit a lot faster. There are a lot of presets available to purchase online. They're free. Some are paid. They're amazing to get started. And I also use them initially, when I was starting, 2014, 2015. However, I feel like they're not personalized. They are very generic. I mean, if your photo looks like someone else's on the on the internet, and I just don't feel like they portray my mood, what my story is, and what my personality is. I don't think so they portray that. So I stopped using presets altogether. I don't use anymore, but then again, I am not against it if someone's using it. So now we are going to go into the Lightroom, right? So the Lightroom has several modules. So the first one is like the Lightroom library module, right? So where I'm actually importing everything. So here you see that on the right, I have this, this is the library module. So the Lightroom is a perfect software to organize files, make a selection, send contact sheets to clients, and do minor edits. So often when I'm taking a lot of photos, I create a contact sheets. Let's say I'm taking 300 photos, right? And of course, client don't want 300 photos. I generally send them, let's say 12, I make a contact sheet, I send them. They pick, say, okay, can you edit these two for me? Of course, because editing takes a lot of time for me. So I generally ask them to pick a couple. So they will pick a couple and then I will edit them. So this is amazing to do it in Lightroom. It also helps when you want to add a title, caption, and keywords, which is very important for stock photography. And I know there's a lot of questions on stock photography, was in the last session, and a lot of you have. My next workshop is going to be on that. And you can learn a lot more about stock photography and what goes in it in that. You know, you can learn a lot about this module in Google by Googling Lightroom library module. Just Google this term, Lightroom library module, and you will see a lot of information there. But, you know, what I have seen in my case, don't fill your head too much with the information that you lose all the fun of editing. Like, know these tools are there. I mean, you will learn sometime by practicing it, but just don't, you know, cram your head with like so much information available everywhere that you basically lose the fun of editing. You basically lose your creativity. So always remember that. But again, end of the day, this is just a tool to make your photo or any of your artwork looks pretty. So always remember that when you are getting all this information. Next one is the Lightroom Develop module. So there are 9 parts, basic, tone curve, and all this, and 6 adjustment brushes. And here I'm going to say something my professor said when I was taking a photojournalism course at Harvard. There's a difference between photography and art. And I personally did not like when he said that, but I will tell you why. So he said a photograph is a photo taken and edited lightly with Lightroom. Most news organization that, I mean, I worked in Boston Globe, but most news organization in United States, excluding New York Times, will not take Photoshop images as they do not like altered reality. I know New York Times allow it, but because, like I said, I worked for Boston Globe and we were part of New York Times for a long time. So I know for a fact that they do take Photoshopped image, but Boston Globe did not. Because Photoshop, when you take the photo to an image, Photoshop, remove things that you don't like, add things that you like, then it becomes an altered image, right? For example, here, you know, there was a lot of areas that my photo had issues, like water droplets. I created a few extra. Again, it's an altered reality. It's not the reality. So there's a difference between photo and art. And that's what my professor said. And you cannot do these kind of like detail, like, you know, like I said, mask cloning, or like, you know, removing a portion or adding. You can do like these days, I mean, with Lightroom a little bit, but for majority, like, you know, if you want to create a droplets or something like that, you would still need the help of Photoshop. But then again, we're not talking about that. We're talking about Lightroom. So, you know, in our class, we were prohibited to use Photoshop. And he said the people who submitted a Photoshopped image, they actually got 0 in that assignment because we were like prohibited from using it. But again, it was a photojournalism course. So we were asked to take photos and create, you know, a photo that looks soothing to us. So minimum Lightroom editing was fine. So the next one, I'm going to say that what I use when I edit, okay? So my most used things are these: exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, blacks. These are, I always use it. This is something I will definitely use it no matter what the photo is. I use the texture, clarity, dehaze, vibrance, and saturation is a little less. So here, actually, I'm going to say this. So there's a best way to learn editing. And again, I learned this also from one of my professors. You see these sliders, just move them. Like move it to -100 and move it to plus 100 and see what your photo is doing. This is the best way to learn that, you know, what you need for that part. Even till this date, I move these sliders to see what direction my photo is going. That being said, my comfortable settings are between -20 here, between -20 and 20. It never goes beyond that. I mean, I have personally seen if it goes beyond that, I do not like that photo. So this is my comfort area. But again, you could have it -30 if you like that kind of photo. So again, you have to find what works for you by moving the slider. The second adjustment, and this is the most, I find this is the most difficult, or it just curves can like go on. And I actually, I'm going to share a YouTube link that where you can learn a lot more about Lightroom curves very soon. So, this is the strongest tool. There's a lot you can do. There's a basic you can take, and these curves where you see these curves, these curves is like you could take it down to the lower, that way it's going to get darker. If you take it down the curve top higher level, it's going to get more brighter. Curves can make your photo look lighten or darken, increase contrast. You can also change, let's say if your photo is a little too blue, you can use the blue between RGB, the blue channel, and then decrease the blue by using more yellow and red. You can do the same with the red channel and the green channel. Like I said, this is a lot to do in curves, and so you can learn a lot more about curves. And I personally think one should learn what curves can do in a photos. So that's why this link is very helpful, the YouTube link, that where you can learn a lot more about curves. But that being said, I personally find the Lightroom curves is very difficult to handle. So I just use it very tiny bit and just, use the bottom of it, just increasing it a bit high. You will see it in a second when I'm showing my video. But it's, again, I find it's easier to handle in Photoshop than in Lightroom, because where I can change opacity if it's too much, if it's too little. But I find it Lightroom is a little bit hard to do it in curves. But again, one can master it. It's really not a rocket science. The third adjustment I do is the HSL and color panel, right? So HSL, so basically you can adjust the particular color of a photo to your liking. So two most tools that I use is saturations and luminance. So, I use hue, but very less. But once again, I play with the slider to see what it's doing to my photo. Sometimes I would make the orange like completely gone and say, okay, so I'm losing. So orange actually kind of helps us to pick our skin color. So you will see which color does what to your photo by moving it. So, and in that way, if you don't like some colors, you could tone it down, you could mute it, so move the saturation on the left. If you want to make it pop, then you could turn it towards the right, like, bring the slider to the right and then make it look pop more. Luminance is definitely helps a color like, make more bright or pop. So sometimes if I'm using red or green or bright green, I would use the luminance slider to mute the color if it's too much in the photo. The fourth adjustment is color grading. I use it to adjust highlights, midtones, shadows to get the desired moods. In this photo, in my photos, I like it a bit more warmer tone than a cooler tone. But, this is the area where your photo can have different mood based, what you like with this color grading. The next one is the lens corrections. I never import a photo without it. Stock agencies do not accept photo without you doing the lens correction. So that's a must for me. Every photo of mine goes through that. Transform, I use it sparingly. Depends on what lenses I'm using. If I'm using, if it's a tight crop shot, sometimes it's not needed. But for overhead shot, if I'm using a 35 millimeter, sometimes I notice some distortion. I would use it, but again, I sometimes see if it needed or not. So again, it's not always used. Architecture, sometimes I do use it when I'm taking my snow photos, landscape, or even to an extent, even if I'm taking a front shot, I do use it. But like I said, I check it how much I need it. It's not like too much. I would go just make the photo look like skewed or something. So before we dive deep into an editing, we have all these tools, right? You got the hardy eyes emoji, right? But you want to use all of it. It's like I said, like you got all these like colors and brushes. You want to use all. But just because you have these tools, that doesn't mean you have to like overuse it, right? So make sure that when you are using, that's because you have the saturation tool. You shouldn't make the red look like it's gonna hurt someone's eyes. Again, if that's a style, you want to go like super vibrant, you want to like neon pink. I mean, yesterday I was at Christian Dior's shop and they were promoting a very loud gown, in my opinion, very vibrant, very colorful. Again, that's the style they're promoting. That's perfect. But again, I would not pick that. So if your style is, I want a really loud colors, of course you use saturations. But again, use what in my opinion, the photos that are a little bit lower on saturation, so the color looks a little perfect the way they are, is works. But again, you will find it what works for you by practicing. I have seen a lot of oversaturated photos that I feel like is a killer. I mean, I just didn't think this photo needed that much saturation. For example, strawberries, blood oranges, mangoes, these are very saturated. Like when you see up the colors through the camera and the lens, you will see these are very vibrant photos. And so in those cases, I toned down the colors. I reduced the saturation a little bit. So it looks, the color looks like natural, doesn't look like overkilling. So you will always have to see that, like where you need to increase the saturation and where you need to decrease it. And I always aim for a soothing view when it comes to color, because I personally think too much color can make you like, I don't know if I like it, or maybe like make you scroll faster, like it's too much. But you can always have enough drama with light and shadow. Remember the Dutch masters, they have mastered, their art looks amazing to look at because they play with light and shadow. So your photo needs that. And my last workshop was on light and shadow, so you can learn a lot more about that there. Before we begin, I want to make sure that you understand. Keep this simple and fun. This is not a chore. This is not a rigorous assignment. If you don't like editing, that's okay. You don't have to edit. Just touch minimal. And then you can still post it and it's fine. I have seen photos like that and it's fine. If you want to say your story in many ways, you could write it. You don't have to like edit it. So make sure it's simple and fun. It's not like overcomplicated. My Lightroom workflow is very simple, and that is all I do for food photography. I do not edit them in Photoshop. That said, my portraits and still photos are my personal work. They are not commissioned through any stock agencies because they are not going to accept a photo that's been so photoshopped. So I spend hours learning Photoshop and editing those photos. Once again, I want to give them a painterly effect, which is, you can do it through only Photoshop. But again, these are my personal work, nothing to do with food photography. And so let's edit a photo together, and we will talk about like all these tools and everything together. All right, so I am going to show, this is my Lightroom panel. And I'm going to show like, how I'm editing. So first, here I'm at the library module, and I'm going to the histogram I'm opening, and then the basics. You will see first, I want to stop here. First, I check the white balance. Okay, before I talk about white balance, I want to make sure you understand I always photograph in Kelvin scale. So this photograph, when I took it, I liked the way it looked. I mean, if I want the photo to look cooler, I'll reduce the Kelvin scale. If it's warmer, and higher scale. Again, the Kelvin scale varies during season. So during summer months, I adjust my Kelvin scale. And then when we are going to fall, I'll change the Kelvin scale in my camera. So again, this photo was photographed with Kelvin scale, not an auto or any of ice white balance. So let's see, this is auto, it looks a lot bluer. So I'm gonna try to see how it looks if it's a little warmer. So I kind of play with it a little bit. And then I use the dropper tool, and then I wanna stop. See, here I put it on the white area, and I always make sure my R is greater than G and the G is greater than B. That's one formula I always make sure my photos have. In that way, you can make sure your photo white balance is right. I mean, this is the one trick I worked for me. But then again, like I said, I like my photo is a tad bit warm. And if you see everywhere I take, the white balance is nearly perfect. But so let's see, then I have done the exposure, a little bit, tad higher, 0.10, contrast 5, perfect for me. 10, I wanted to be a little bit light and airy. So here I'm actually increasing the shadows, not decreasing, because I don't want it to look too dark on the left side on here. Going again white. Again, I'm aiming for a light and airy mood, not a moody photo. This will all change if I was editing a moody photo. Texture a little bit because it's a food shot. Clarity, again, like I said, it's a bit between 5 and 7, maybe. I don't even go like 7, that's most I go. Vibrancy, sometimes I keep 5, and between 3 and 5. Tone curve, yeah, and here you see, I just do that. Yeah, because it kind of takes the shadows off and it makes the photo a little muted. rather than contrast, too much contrast, but that's it. Then I go HSL, luminance. Okay, I reduce the blue because like I said, I do not like blue tint on my photo, on my food photos. But sometimes I reduce and I was like, okay, I would do -6, maybe more. Yeah, see, I keep trying. I mean, I'm not happy. I just kept trying it. But then I increased it. Okay, because I'm at luminance. Okay, increasing saturation, decreasing the blue. Because I increased the pasta a little bit because they were yellow. I wanted the green, olives. So I'm deciding still what kind of, and here, yeah, see, I want to decrease the green so that make sure the olive popping. And now the color grading, look at it. So here you see these are custom colors. Already Adobe have picked that for you. If this wheel, I mean, this is a new thing Adobe has done with Lightroom. If this is not comfortable for you to pick, I go ahead with this if I'm editing very fast. And that's perfect. I mean, you'll see that in a second. I picked that because, like, again, warm tone. I reduce the saturation so it's not too much. I'll go with the mid-tone, similar. Yeah, you see that if you use that, that's okay because I use the saturation level low so it's not too much. And finally, the shadows. So I keep in between blue and yellow when it comes to shadows and highlights. So it kind of aims for not too warm, but again, depends on the photo. Sometimes I go all warm. Everything will be warm. Shadows, mid-tone, highlights. Sometimes it's a mix. Sometimes I go all blue. I mean, again, what mood I want to achieve. Details. No, let's see. All right. I'm going between 5, 6, 5. Again, like I said, I keep going between to see, what works. And again, this is my, this is how I edit, like going in between different slides. It's like as if my life depends upon this 4 and 5. I will go like 10 minutes thinking that. Again, like I said, nobody cares, but I will still go. And there, I want to like increase this portion. So I picked this radial tool to increase the left side. So hold on, I want to stop here. So here you see, I created all of these in the bottom on my own. So you can create that when you like a particular brush, but there are also for Lightroom has this on their own. So you will learn it when you click on it and you were like, okay, I like this setting, I want to save it. So I like this over brighten, but where the shadows are at 62, but you'll see that how am I reducing it slowly. This is what I meant, like where you can save it. And I want to stop it here. You see on the left, user presets, that these are the gin, because I was editing a lot of gin photos. So that's the presets that I was editing. But so I have a lot of presets that I create while editing. So playing with the radial tool, I notice in that way, I get a lot of light added back to the photos in the left area. And then I'm picking darken. And here I have used this tool to create a dark gradient on the bottom, graduated filter on the top, but not covering the plate. Then I'm going to go exposure, tad bit higher, another one in the bottom. Just make sure that photo is uniform and the plate's popping. You could use that. Yeah, you could use that. Picking the darken again. And now I'm using on the entire pasta because it looks a little too bright. But again, I want to pause here and go a little back. You see, this is my darken brushes. It's not too much, but reducing the light a tad bit. And again, you can see what your mask is using this show. Yes, so selected mask overlay. And then I inverted so the outside looks a little dark and the plate pops out more. Again, aiming for the soothing view, not like too bright. Adjusting. If in case, again, it's needed, you can always adjust it if it's not too much of your liking. And you see where it says dark and edited, sometimes I will save it, but sometimes I don't need to. So again, it depends. Reduce the clarity. Again, very, very subtle, not too much. You see, very subtle. See, if I go too dark, it looks too dark. So I'll see how far I can go. And then I was like, okay, that's perfect. And okay, maybe I was like, I want to increase. Again, you see my mood changes so much while I'm editing because the photo needs it. I was like, okay, it's not working. Let's go in the other direction. Let's go in this direction. So again, it fluctuates a lot. Now, I picked actually the brush, and I'm going to brush some of the pastas just to give a little bit more light. And you can change the flow of how much light it's coming. If you feel the light, you're getting a lot of like light falling on it, like, you know, you're getting a too much of the effect of the brush, basically in your case, brighten in my case is too much. You can reduce the flow so it doesn't like you're not brushing too much. Basically think about it, how much color you're picking from the pot. And if you're too much flow means, you know, you're going a lot versus little or, you know, just a subtle. So again, you can pick that. Or you could do that. Once you have the brush, you can pick to your liking. We're halfway there, guys, with the editing. See, reducing the saturation makes the pasta look a little white, not the yellow tone of the pasta I like. Yeah, see this, it's very, yeah, I wanted to just show you what that one does. Yep. I never ever even touched that. So I'm just gonna go to 0. It's perfect if you just want to use like a pickle or like a chili or olives, just a particular portion, but definitely not such a huge ones. Cleaning up the plate a bit. Also, this is photographed with the natural light at 11:30, I believe, before my lunchtime. Yep, that's the shadow looks. And if I don't like an area, I'm using erase brush on the right to erase certain portions, because if it's like, you know, going over the area that I don't want to. Just make sure everything is in line. I sometimes go like way long time with the brushes if I'm not happy, but with this photo, it was okay. It's not too much light. Again, checking that, checking there, maybe reduce it, yeah. So that it doesn't look like too much light on the side, just to give it. And the reason is I increase the I reduce the shadows so the shadows pop again. So the photos get a 2-dimensional effect if it's too airy, too bright, and doesn't losing all the shadows. If it has a shadows a little dark, it has a 3D appearance. So when you're looking at a photo, you feel like, okay, this is not flat. Like, again, photo like a 2D, it feels like a 3D, like a more lively to you. Now I'm going to make it 0, which it was originally at. And This point, yes. So, and there it is, the final one. This is the before and after shot. See how it was and how light it is now. I mean, it was a pink, pink tinge to it, a pink hue to it, versus it's a lot more brighter, a little bit more blue. And that you can decide, you know, at this point, if you want to go farther or you want to stop here. I mean, this is a good stopping point. You can see always before and after. And again, like I said, like always export it and see if it's like, okay, after I looked, I was like, oh, maybe I can do, you know, like create those spots. And I was like, okay, so this is this Lightroom spot healing. I used it very sparingly, mostly. Rarely I use it, but if I have to, I use it in Photoshop. But again, Lightroom has that feature. But yeah, there kind of ends my Lightroom editing process. So I'm going to go back where I go between, you know, actually, you know what? I want to talk a little bit more about this. Okay. So here, actually, I want to talk about the clone and heal. Like I said, I don't use it much. So visualize spots, like where you can edit it. But there was a black spot there. Let's fix that. Again, I find it a little bit difficult to edit this with Lightroom versus if you're editing with Photoshop, these things are faster. But again, you don't have to use Photoshop. Lightroom is perfect. I mean, that spot, yeah, it's pretty perfect with Lightroom. I mean, you really need a microscope to find these spots, but trust me, stock agencies do find these spots and they will send it back so they clear those out. So, you know, and these are coming actually because I did not clean my lens after a shoot. And this is, I think it was after snow or something, I don't remember. But so these were some spots in my camera I wish I cleaned. But again, sometimes, you know, you cannot be 100% right all the time. Still going back. I mean, despite the photo is fully edited, I'm like nearly done. I liked, I was like, okay, I think the pasta looked, like I said, I will not stop unless I'm like, okay, I keep going back again, came, and okay, I got to edit it a little bit more, edit again. But trust me, it reaches a point where I'm finally happy. I'm like, okay, I don't want to edit it anymore. So it will reach that point in very soon. But again, going and coming back in the photos. Yeah, and I think I'm done. And at that point, I have my final photo. I think I'm content with it, and I feel confident enough to post this on social media or my blog or my portfolio or send it to the client. And I consider it done after that point. So it's not a lot of time because I timed this whole thing. I did not, this is not an like cut and paste video. If you see the total, it took me 11 minutes, 34 seconds, like 12 minutes to edit that photo. But like I said, I will sit on it, maybe add another 5 more minutes of edit to it. But again, food photo, I do not spend a lot of time editing it. So it's a very short editing for me. So that's all I had.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dolphia. We really appreciate that. That was great. Definitely gave me a new perspective on the way I shoot my food, because I'm always getting attacked by my wife that the images I post on any of the social media sites are just awful. So I think I think this was actually really helpful for me to take a step back, and maybe I've got to go and start editing my photos a little bit more and putting a little bit more time into it. One of the things I did want to find out from you is, you mentioned that you won't spend a whole lot of time on it and that you'll kind of just work it till you're sort of happy. Is there ever a point where, I mean, how do you determine that? What's your gauge and your measure of happiness in there? I know sometimes I fall into that OCD range where I could just go forever. When do you finally realize, like, that's it, I'm done, I'm completely happy?
So for me, if a photo, when I'm taking the photo, I have a vision in mind, right? How I want this photo to look. So when I achieve this vision, I feel it done. For example, when I'm taking photos of food, it's simple. You see the food in front of you, you photograph it. You want it to look how it exactly looked on your plate. And this is why I started doing food photography, because if you see my earlier photos, it doesn't look that appetizing. It doesn't look that great depth and flavors that I'm tasting. But so this is why I started doing food photography. And I feel like when my photos, like, people feel the freshness of olives and this pasta, which is a hard pasta. And I feel like when someone's expecting, oh, these noodles are like, these pastas are like properly oil coated with the quality olive oil. And that's it. This is a very simple recipe. But I want the people to understand freshness of it, lightness of it. And when I feel like I even feel that after looking at a photo, maybe an hour, maybe a next day, I'm like, okay, I'm done. But when it comes to portrait, I really don't have a stopping point. I could go on, and I could go like maybe days with it, and I maybe ruin the photo to an extent. So what I do is I actually ask my family members to look at it and say, what do they think about it? And they're very honest about it. They will say, no, it looks absolutely ridiculous. Maybe you should reduce the yellow. I mean, it looks like, your photo has gone through sepia filter and stuff. So they will say stuff like that. And then, of course, I work on those photos again. Like, that's why I said that my portraits and still life takes way longer time in editing. And ironically, I don't make many money out of it because I never sell those. But again, it's something I enjoy doing it. So I do it.
Great. Excellent. Thank you so much for that. So we do have some questions coming in here that we wanted to address. Hayden, thank you very much for joining us. Hayden wanted to know, you referred to camel case previously in the beginning when you were referring to how you name your photos. Can you explain what camel case is exactly?
Well, so, as a developer, I mean, I kind of know what camel case, huh? I never, I have to ask my husband, who's also, it's for it's for just like capital. Each the first letter is a capital. Like, let's say F is capital, S is capital, and C is capital. That's what it means by camel case.
And the first letter of the title close.
Yeah, the first letter of the title. Like, fall will be, it's like not like first, like fall will be small f. That's what I mean by camel case.
Gotcha. So basically you're capitalizing all the beginnings of the words so that they all fall in. Okay, excellent. Great. And
I never knew this because, it's like when you go to engineering that your teacher tells do this. I was like, I never asked the question. I'm glad, but surprisingly, my husband knew what it meant. So
that's great. Could you briefly speak to the advantages or disadvantages of Creative Cloud versus classic Lightroom?
So Creative Cloud versus classic Lightroom. A lot of people, before Creative Cloud, all this started, I used Lightroom. I mean, I had the software I purchased, I think it was $100. It is perfect. I mean, if someone's just using Lightroom, it's okay. But if you want to use Lightroom and Photoshop, and this is something I also spoke with someone, a photographer I spoke with, when I asked him which your editing software, he said Lightroom and Photoshop. I said, how can it be both? It should be one. He said, no, not really. I use Lightroom and then I take my photos to Photoshop and then I edit it, then I export back it to Lightroom and then export it again as a photo. I mean, again, it's not the ideal workflow, but some people might not like it. Like I said, my husband thinks it's a ludicrous workflow. Someone should work either Lightroom or Photoshop. I mean, Creative Cloud subscriptions offer you to go back and forth between these two software, but if you're against Photoshop, like, again, you don't want to use it at all, I think the Lightroom itself is self-sufficient.
Great. And I know that's something, maybe people remember back in the day, when Bridge first came out. I know a lot of people used to use Bridge to import everything into Bridge, and then you even had that extra step of Bridge into Lightroom, then into Photoshop, then into export. Maybe now we're lucky that we just have Lightroom and Photoshop. It makes it a little bit more simplistic with
I don't think so. Adobe sells the software, right? Or I don't know. B&H probably knows more than I do. You probably do know.
Selling just the software on its own, it's pretty much all Creative Cloud based.
Yeah, that's what I think. At this point, it's all Creative Cloud.
Yeah. Do you mind restoring how to use the tool to pick one area to edit? Just going over that again and just showing exactly which tool that was. Elizabeth joining us. Elizabeth was asking if you can just go over the tool and how you picked just one specific area of the photo that you wanted to edit. If you could just highlight which tool that was.
Oh, this one, the clone tool, this round tool, this clone, right? Removing the spots?
Not removing the spots, but just when you actually, highlighted just portions of the pasta itself, and just kind of picked specific areas that you were working on. If you could just show which tool that was.
I use this radial brush tool to make the big one, and the gradient to, increase this and that. And then this adjustment brush, which looks like a brush, that I used to just highlight the pasta. And yeah, here, this particular tool on the right.
Excellent.
This brush, yeah.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, Dolphia, I really want to thank you for joining us. My wife is probably going to thank you, because now I'm going to have to go and purchase Lightroom again and start importing all my photos into there before I post them to Instagram. So at least maybe she'll want to, eat what I'm cooking finally again, or maybe not. Probably not anyway. For everybody who's tuning in, just as a reminder, Dolphia will be back on June 23rd, right?
Yes.
Yes, June 23rd at the same time. So the 1 to 2 p.m. slot, she'll be here on that day. She'll be talking about the stock photography world and everything you need to know about it. So we are looking forward to that. Make sure to go ahead and get registered for that if you haven't already. It's up on the B&H Event Space page. Dolphia, how can people find you, just as if they want to find you and check out some of your work?
So I have a website, dolphianandi.com. They can check my work there. And if they're on social media, they can find me at Instagram, dolphia.n.arnstein, ARNSTEIN.
Excellent, excellent. Which we might just change to Dolphia, right? We might.
No, I want to keep my husband's last.
You want to keep it. You want to keep it. All right, we're gonna keep the last name. I did get, we did get one last question in here before we go. Sure. Coming in from live stream. Do you consider the timeline at all given to you for a client and their work when you're editing, how much time you actually spend editing based on when you have to deliver?
So when, I touched up on this a little bit briefly. So when I am actually editing for a client, like I said, there are some clients, they will say, I want 40 photos edited. I want to see all photos edited, and then I'm going to make a pick. There are some clients like that, and I ended up not working for them. I said, look, it's impossible, because you're spending a lot more time, and then they're saying, well, I don't like the shoot. Maybe can you reshoot again? So again, there are clients like that, I will tell. But the most clients that I end up working with, they will pick some photos from a contact sheet, and they have seen my editing. They know what I can do with that photo. So even if the photo is little, when it's first started, if it's a little bit less exposed, they understand this photo is gonna look like the final one, because based on editing style. So they will pick a couple of photos, like say 5 photos, they will ask me to edit. And I would spend about 2-3 hours editing it and then submitting. So yes, I do consider editing as part of my fee, because I spend a significant time, editing, correcting it, removing spots, making sure they can use this photo for social media, brochures, campaigns, or anywhere they want to, because these are pretty high quality shots. Like once exported, they are close to 20 megabytes each photos, and they have a lot more details that they could expand, and they could see like I said, in big brochures, and also they could do that.
Great, thank you so much. And then just touching on the contact sheets themselves, how do you export those out and send them, or do you just send them as individual files?
Oh, no. When in Lightroom, there's this print you see, and in print, when you, maybe I can show it via Lightroom directly. Actually, none of my photos are here because I don't have external hard drive with me, but let me see. I mean, they won't, of course, print because none of the photos are here. But this is actually, I was just working on this project. This is with my daughter. It's a Marie Cassatt, but let's see, this one is one for the client work, right? And I have, let's say, picked these ones. So once you select hit all, and then you go to print, that's your contact sheet right there. And there you can I have these many photos that I can decrease the number of columns. Yeah. And I can actually pick a different contact sheet because I don't need that many photos. So perhaps maybe, sorry, I'm going in the opposite directions, looks like. Yeah, so you can, you see, there's a lot more options. You will find something that, you like 4 wide. Yeah, so this is how sometimes I would send like this so that photo sees the proper way. But you see, this is 3 pages because there's and how you can go between, like, so this is page 1 of 3, and there you have an option to export it. So there you see this print, and of course it won't because none of these photos are here, but there is an option to print, and you can print it as a file, and this file will save on your on anywhere you're exporting, basically desktop or something, and you can send this as a contact sheet to your client. I notice a lot of wedding photographers that do that. Of course, my class, my professor definitely mandated this for any assignment we delivered, because he would manually hand pick a couple for us to edit. So this was the workflow I have done it there as well.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Dolphia. We really appreciate you being here and spending part of your afternoon with us. For everybody who's tuning in, we really appreciate you as well joining us for this afternoon. Don't forget, like I said, June the 23rd, Dolphia will be back. So make sure to get registered for that. Until the next time, we'll see you then.